Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phil Hoffman. I'm on the board of Hub 88, and we're here to help ignite the next wave of innovation and using technologies that impact the way we work, live, and learn. And we're here today to have a tech talk, and Lori Swanson will introduce our speaker, but I just wanted to make sure everybody felt welcome and to mention our communications lab memberships are open. We have companies that are coming in and using our LTE and 5G private networks that are standalone and available for companies to connect their machines to and their applications and test of their wireless communications. And so helping them accelerate getting their products to market. So we have our tech talks every month. And as I mentioned, our communications lab memberships, and we have some other programming that's upcoming. So we want you to pay attention to our website, hub88.org, and stay tuned. Lori Swanson, introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone to another Tech Talk. It's August. It means kids are going back to school, and I no longer have 40 pairs of shoes by my back door because both of my kids are off to college. And that's how I know that school is in session, is I now have my shoes and my husband's shoes, and that's it. But today I will be introducing Helen Yu, and I have a couple people who told me about this talk, and that's why we were really excited to bring her here. But I have to tell you, when I talked to her, I thought, oh my God, just seeing her backstory is going to be worth your trip here today. Helen comes to us by way of Beijing, and she was raised by her grandparents and 9 boys, 8 cousins and her brother. So she said, I was pretty much a tomboy growing up. It really informed her and helped her as she made her way into the tech field. But now you'll always see her in a dress because she loves dresses. So when she came to the US in 1991, she did it to pursue her education. She completed her degree in her MBA in 1997 from Loyola. And not long after that, became a citizen in 2000. So we now, after completing her MBA, she did accounting and finance, worked with CFOs and CIOs, building Hyperion, if people know of Hyperion, software platform, financial planning models. She said she designed and coded over 400 Hyperion apps. So that's a dang lot of apps. She eventually was running the national practice for Hyperion when they were acquired by Oracle. She stayed with Oracle, and they asked her to run their BI consulting practice. And eventually she joined their North American strategy and sales team as a solutions architect. So a solutions architect is someone who is working with the C-suite, helping them to understand their business case, and then creating solutions for them, sort of pitching the solution and getting them to sign up as clients, I guess I would say. And she was doing this for Oracle. She left Oracle and joined Adobe. So another name you will have heard of, but this was really when Adobe was at early 15 million in sales. And Helen was integral in helping them build out their marketing and sales in order to grow them to 60 million in just 2.5 years. So very fast scale. When she left Adobe, she joined Marketo, another software startup, strong. They did, I guess what I would say, story-driven presentations that helped to create demand for companies is kind of how I would say it. But again, they were marketing automation leaders. And when she joined them, they were about 60 million, I believe, and she took them to 280 million. And then they were sold for 1.8 billion. So in just 3.5 years. So again, a pretty incredible story of scaling, helping companies scale to financial success for, I'm sure, everyone that worked there. some more than others, but everyone that worked there. And then she started Tigan. And Tigan is her own company. The name comes from a combination of her son Tiger, her son Leon. So Tigan. So I think that there's, well, let me get to that. So what Tigan does is helps companies scale. What she's done well for other companies, she's now helping companies do. Her first client was an AI company that she took them from 170,000 to 4.5 million in less than 2 years. She's now working with a sales collaboration company, helping them do similar numbers. She and her family love the outdoors, hiking, traveling. I believe they have as a family, have visited almost all of our national parks. I cannot say that. I know that for sure. And that is why she is perfectly positioned to talk to us about her time scaling to base camp at Mount Everest and how that can help you, what she learned in order to help scale. So please give a warm welcome after my very long introduction, but I couldn't get anything out of her story, to Helen Yu. Thanks, Helen. I think she might.
Good evening, everyone. In the past 12 months, I actually spoke in many major cities: San Francisco, New York, Chicago, London. It's a special night for me tonight because this is my first talk in Naperville after living here for 18 years. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Let me try to get the clicker here. I'm really excited about the opportunity to share with you, really talk about the biggest threat. I call them disconnect. Really move a startup to scale up. The biggest threat is really disconnect. And then how we're going to talk about how we look at ways of overcoming and preventing them tonight. So let me begin 8,000 miles west of here. It is few hundred of climbers stirring inside tents there because at that intense, if the intense moonlight does not keep them up, the altitude sickness would. I know that because I was one of them 12 years ago. As Laurie mentioned, my grandma actually raised me with nine cousins. I was the only girl and the youngest growing up. My grandma always wanted to make sure I grew up strong and stay strong. So before she passed away, she said to me, "Can you make sure you spread my ashes in Mount Everest?" So that really, the secret promise I made it to her, that was the reason why I took the initiative to scale the Mount Everest. There are actually, most importantly, it's not about the experience climbing the Mount Everest. It's really the lessons I learned scaling that mountain. There are 4 lessons like to share with you. They carried with me in the past 12 years. Every time I work with a company who run into challenge scaling their company, I always refer back to my scaling Mount Everest experience, and I was able to leverage that experience tremendously. So the first one is to prepare. In order to climb or scale a mountain, you have to prepare. What that means is that you have to first decide the partners you go with, and also get yourself physically ready. More than months of training. You have to select the trainer to get trained with. You have to talk to people who has been there, done that, trying to figure out what you're going to pack with. As you can tell, the time, because 2 years ago, they didn't have this exo suit. I wish they had the 5 kilogram lightweight suit that you can wear with, and we had to pack quite differently. And then most importantly, you have to understand why you're doing that. For me, I had to do it because just to keep my promise I made with my grandma. So preparation is really, really important. No matter how well you're prepared, you always run into challenges as you get to the mountains. We actually broke our camera the day before the trip. We also, run into the weather condition that when the winds picked up, and then the temperature really changed drastically. There also a river actually rised knee high. Among all the 200 people who tried to there, 3 people made it. There are many reasons for that, right? Because as you really went all the way through, there's a sign there saying that tourists stop beyond this point, where we didn't consider ourselves as tourists anymore. After being trained for more than a month, we decided to press on. So we made it there. As you can tell, that's on Earth's marker, their base camp marker there. It's quite a journey to get there. So this is the second lesson, is how you adapt to changes, and you have to make executive decision as you run into challenge scaling the mountain. And the route to Mount Everest is not really straightforward. All the climbers, they're trying to get to the summit. In order for you to go to the summit, once you get to Camp 1, you actually have to get back to base camp. Then you get to Camp 2, you go back to base camp. So there are 5 camps total. Every time you reach a camp, you go back to base camp. So base camp is actually a profound marker to remind us that sometimes in order to move forward, you have to take a step back. Right? That's where we call acclimate, right? How you really get yourself used to the weather condition or altitude, high altitude, so that you can really, get all the way through the summit without any concerns. Otherwise, they can just drop you off through helicopter. If they do that to you, you probably would be dead. That's acclimate. And then as we back through the trailhead, we were recommended to the IV fluid to celebrate. It was 12 days. After 12 days journey, losing 15% of body weight, I was grateful to reunite with most of the people we actually left behind. A lot of people went with us, could not really make it, but they waited for us at the hospital to celebrate. And then we had the champagne, obviously, later on. So as I walk you through the 4 lessons, right? Prepare, adapt, acclimate, and celebrate. In the past 12 years, I'm struck by the fact that 90% of startups actually fail, right? As they scale through the company, they move from idea to product to scale, product to market to scale. 90% of them fail. Why is that? Because of the traction gap. Right? The traction gap really refers to the period as you initiate your launch your initial product to the period that you really go to market with that. There are 5 traction gaps we identified. So in order to scale the company, you have to overcome all these 5 traction gaps scale. The number 1 is product market fit, right? As you turn your idea into product, you have to make sure whatever product you build is aligned with market demand. The second one is define minimum gap. As you move from product to market, you have to make sure your minimum viable product is marketable. And the other 3 gaps here is voice of customer gap as I talk about acclimate, you have to constantly acclimate with, listening to your customer. And then you also have to have process and measurement in place in order to scale. So in the next few minutes, I will share 4 real life stories, like 4 companies I've been working or I've worked with, how we take them from where they were to where they are at today. And then all the 5 traction gaps we help them overcome to scale their business. The first one is the preparation. I got engaged with this conversational AI company when they were really early. They have about 15 people with 4 co-founders there. They only had 2 customers at the time, and then was primarily focused on financial service vertical. So what they do, they provide the conversational capability to the banking, like if you're a retail bank, their customers can talk to this app, say, hey, you tell me how much money I spent in California in the last months. So it tells you how much. And then you want to say, I want to take David out for dinner tonight. Can I spend $400 for dinner? And the app will respond to say, based on your spending habit, we don't recommend you spend $400 for dinner. This will be 10% above your regular spend, right? So it also really, you can trade stocks with the app. You can say, I want to sell 10 shares of my Google stock, traded with 5 shares of Amazon stock. So it does all that sort of things for you. When I get engaged with them, they were in the process of figuring out the product market fit. So, usually I would not jump right into, in order to figure out product market fit, I usually have them take a step back, say, let's really think about what is your brand identity? How do you want people to associate you with anything, right? You think about Disney, it is making people happy. You think about Apple, their tagline is think differently, and Nike is just do it, right? So I use the 2 or 3 word strategy. I usually talk to the founder, tell me, what is this company about? Why did you even start the business, right? Tell me more about your vision is, why you're having the business you're having, what exactly you want to accomplish, what problem you want to solve, right? So we were really talking about, the mission and vision they have. And then we figured out it's not about financial customers that really relevant to their solution. We learned that it's more of voice, the capability. You can drive through, right? You can drive through McDonald's to order the food using the same technology, or you can have an in-car experience while you're driving to say, I want to drive to New York. Can you tell me how much gasoline I have left? How many more hours can I drive with this car? So there are many things we can do because of that experience, right? We came off with a tagline, revolutionize the conversational experience. Those are the 3 words become their tagline. We were able to expand them from 1 vertical to 3, right? We expanded to QSR, the quick service, quick food service. Then we also extended them to automotive vertical. Then we extended them from 2 customers, converted them. They have a lot of customers in the pipeline, obviously, converted more to 36 customers. And then from the revenue perspective, Laurie actually mentioned earlier, we grew them from 170K to 4.5 million within a year. There's a Forbes article about their growth. You can check on them. They just raised $50 million in May this year. Really fast growing company based out of Michigan. This is how about prepare. How do you get the company prepared? You don't rush into the product market fit. You take a step back, think about what your brand identity is, right? Why you're starting your business, what exactly the problem you want to solve. You can have much broader view on how you're going to achieve that. So preparation is very important. Second company work with Jabit is a MarTech company. When they were started, 2011, at the time, there were only 150 MarTech companies in the entire market. 5 years later, 2016, 6,000 more MarTech companies popped up, right? So it was a time when they need to raise Series A, and then that was a time when they get me engaged. They needed to pivot because no investor would be interested in investing in them at that time, right? Because MarTech company was not as hot as AI 2 years ago. So we look at really this is really how you adapt to market changing environment. So we take a really deeper dive into their business model, what exactly the problem they solve, right? We learned that their biggest and then we talk to their customers, obviously, to learn about the customers who invested in them, why they really invested in them. We learned that most of customers leverage them because of the data, right? Their capability to align marketing and sales, and then help them convert the market lead to a true sales conversion. And then the data, declare the data, right? Because they collect this data first party from consumers directly, allow them to have more targeted marketing campaign. That was very effective. That's how we shifted their go-to-market message, right? We call clear data. We don't call them MarTech anymore, it's declare data. And in addition, we also shifted, they were focusing more on SMB. We changed it to enterprise, right? So their market revenue, if you look at the revenue mix, the enterprise revenue shifted from 45% to 80%. And then we tripled their revenue in 2018, first half of the year, triple that compared to the past 2 years. Very successful. They just raised $12 million in April this year, getting the Series B, and phenomenal growth. They're also ranked the top 25 fastest growing company by CNBC recently. The co-founders, I personally worked with very closely. Both are on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Very, phenomenal, right? Both one dropped out of Harvard School, one dropped out of business, Boston College. And then both worked really closely with their advisors on a regular basis. And then so their ability to adapt really was contributed greatly to their success. The next story is Marketo. Many of you heard about Marketo. Marketo was acquired by Adobe recently at $4.75 billion. But the story at Marketo I want to share with you today is early stage when I joined. They just won IPO at the time. They were about $60 million business, very well known as a market leader in marketing automation, but just for SMB, small, medium business, not for enterprise. So they were trying to hire a leader to help them build out the enterprise business from the ground up. So I was hired to lead the service team, where we had a customer success team there. The challenge they had at the time was that their only really small footprint of enterprise customers, 17 of them, and then most of them were unhappy. So what we did, in order for you to move forward, we have to take a step back and then acclimate with voice of customer. I personally want to talk to every single of these 17 customers along with our CEO. What we learned from them is that marketing automation, the tool itself was not the barrier for companies to adopt, to invest in marketing automation. At the time, the CMO was still really early, right? Early term of CMO, and get confused. They don't understand where they start with marketing automation, how you measure the success of that. And then also in the meantime, I mentioned about there are 6,000 MarTech tools at the time. Most of the companies have CRM, they have email provider, DMP, many marketing tools in the ecosystem. The challenge is about how do I piece them all together? Where does Marketo fit in, right? So in order to be successful, we decided to add a couple of practices. One is the lightweight McKinsey with digital marketing practice. So where we have people with industry expert to come in and they are able to interact with the CMO, right? And build a blueprint with them along the way. At the beginning of the technology implementation, we don't jump right into technology. We start with building out the blueprint for them to say, if you're gonna embark this marketing automation journey, where do you start, right? How does success look like? Where do you go from where you are at today, three months down the road, 6 months down the road, or 12 months down the road? So, and then we also had an integration practice leader who can come in and talk to the CIO, CTO, understand the strategic roadmap, right? On the IT side, how do you really do integration? So by doing that, we were able to elevate the conversation. You think about not only just to drive service deal, but we were able to move the needles, right? From 5K, 10K deal to $5 million business just for single consulting transaction. It was a large enterprise account. Then we also elevated the subscription bookings, and then we grew that from less than $5 million to $155 million ARR within 3.5 years. We obviously had a solution architect, right? That's having been one at Oracle myself, learned that how critical that role is. That's really the role to glue the pre-sales team with the post-sales team, and then really architect the entire deal through the enterprise cycle, and then, you know, really learn about the requirements, what matters to your prospect, and then, you know, how do you really come up with a success roadmap from the get-go, and then so we can drive much larger footprint. So this is how Marketo acclimated with through the voice of customer scale, and then so we were able to sell that to Vista Equities PE firm 3 years ago at $1.8 billion, and then 2 years later, Adobe acquired them at $4.75 billion. So this is the customer I'm working with right now. For those of you, Showpad, probably you haven't, or some of you have or have not heard about sales enablement category definer, right? They actually ranked really high by both Forrester and Gartner. Any company who has a sales team will need a tool like this, right? And talking about if you have a sales team who need to go to a customer to prepare for a pitch to a customer, so they have the content platform that allows you to cherry pick a slide from somewhere or pick a video, combine them together in a very timely fashion. And then also have the coach platform allows you, the global sales team allows you to the pitch, and then you send it to your leader, and for the leader to review your video, your pitch, to criticize that and share feedback. And then that's called content platform. And then they also have the administration, the dashboard capability allows you to see, you know, with all the contents you have available, which piece of content is being highly utilized and the return content. Not only that, and then if you share, you can share the content with your customer after the meeting. You can see, you can track them with their consent, right? You can see if the content has been reviewed or shared beyond that point. Then you can also go to a meeting. They have the meeting IQ, allows you to record meeting with their consent, right? And oftentimes you have these global meetings, not everybody could attend, but by recording them, you can replay that, and then it has a transcript to allows you to analyze, searching using keywords. You can search, you can also understand customer feedback. So they grew 90% year over year recently, and they are, have 2 headquarters. One is in Chicago, one is in Ghent, Belgium. And the Chicago office actually grew from 30 people to 150 people in the past year. They're also continue of hiring right now. And then overall, the company has 450 people now. It's considered the Google in Belgium, right? Because it's a fast growing company there. I mentioned them because I'm very impressed with their culture. I just start engaging with them about almost 2 months now. And it's challenging to maintain culture when you have headquarters, right? One is in US, one is in Europe, but they have been able to maintain the culture. The reason for that is that they celebrate the successful milestone every single week, right? They have the show pie on Fridays, allow each part of the division, to select a topic to share their success across the globe. And then that culture, I find it very difficult, challenging to maintain for many companies. But because of that, they have an open and sharing environment, able to continue to scale as they go. So this is the celebrating, right? The 4 lessons I learned. So hopefully you'll walk away from the 4 things I shared today, right? Prepare, adapt, acclimate, and celebrate. I would love to open up for questions you have. And I'd love to make this more interactive rather than just me talking here.
Okay, questions? I have the mic. Okay.
Oh, I was just curious about your show pad. That's the name of the company today?
Yes, it is the name of the company.
It's very interesting that they can now listen to your conversations and record a search on the words, but can you also do voice imprints to detect who is speaking and then figure out who is the most in the meeting that presents the most questions that are inspiring, or you know what I mean, things like that? Because a lot of times heads of companies have no idea who actually is important in the meetings to brainstorm, cause and ideas to be created, etc.
That's a great question. Absolutely, they do have that called meeting IQ. Obviously, they only record with customers' consent. We always tell them ahead of time because a European company, GDPR, very important. So they do. That's the really nice part of that. If you play the recording, you can tell, right, who is who. So it's quite intriguing for me when I first saw, wow, this is just amazing technology. And then you think about, I was actually at their launch event with Expedia. They just rolled out to a global 200 global team. The adoption took about 3 months, right? So they were about, they have a really large global sales team. It was very difficult for them to centralize, have a central platform. So they used to spend 30% time just searching for content, but this cut away the time searching for content, allowed them to focus on the selling component. That's so that they move the sales like productivity, right? And they move some of the mid-layer sales performer to the top performer. If you move 10% of that over, your revenue conversion is much higher, right? Increase the it does drive your revenue significantly, increase your revenue significantly. Bill?
Yeah, hi, Helen. That was a really interesting topic and outline. As companies scale up, what advice do you have for how the leadership interacts with investors along the way? There's a different investor kind of path too, different from angel to VC to other institutional. So how do you advise companies to work with investors?
Yeah, great question, Phil. So because I worked with all different stages of companies, right? Usually when they're early stage, they start with a seed, right? It can be angel investors, called seeding. And then as they progress, usually before $5 to $2 million, that's where they're at as they progress. Like the first conversational AI company, that was where they were when I joined. When I started working with them, they didn't really raise anything. But then they suddenly raised just one round, $50 million, because they're in the AI space, right? That doesn't happen often, as all you know. And then Javid is different. Javid did the seed with an individual investor for a couple million for 5 years, and then they raised $5 million Series A with single lead investor, and then the Series $12 million, they added another like 2 more investor. The relationship most of the time, when they invest, they expect, some of them expect to be on your board, right? And then some company depends on who you're. Most investors, some are very hands-on, some are hands-off. When I advise the companies, I always say, what do you want to get out of this round, right, of fundraising? Because it's not just to get money. If you want to get their expertise, you have to look at to really make sure whomever you select has a complementary skill set that you need to really help to bridge that gap. And then secondly, if you don't want them to control so much, you don't want them to be on the board, then you select investor who is not interested in driving your day-to-day operations. I also work with the investor who are very into especially PE firm, as you know, they're very into like Marketo. Once we're acquired by Vista, they have the operating principle there that they will be very hands-on, guiding you on a daily basis or monthly basis to ensure that you're on track. So there are different types of investors where, you know, we have to be very mindful about, pair them up with the company I work with. And then actually Showpad just raised $70 million recently. They have multiple investors there, and then each of them has a board seat there. But as you grow beyond that, you sometimes need, especially these days, talking about board diversity, you'll need independent board member. In California, right, has a law, female board member, right? So that's many different dynamic, and then depends on how you really, depends on where you're at with the stage. You have to really make sure that you understand, you know, the nature of the investors and make sure they're the right fit. It's not about just getting the money, it's about finding the right investors. So I work with all these startups to help them go through the process of the investors as well, and then we help them put together the pitch deck to pitch to the investors, and then help them select who they would work with. When they're early, they don't have much choices. Oftentimes, more investors rather than they're choosing investor. But if you're in the AI field or blockchain, these hot technologies, the investors chasing you, this AI company I work with, all the top investors knock on their door constantly. So it just matters of which one they select. So they're more selective than others. And so it depends on what field you're in, the market dynamic.
So I think that's a really good point as far as being able to understand, depending on where your business is, how you're going to scale it. And if you're going to use investors, having that understanding of what type of investor you should use and what sort of questions you should ask. Now, did that fully answer your question? Did that answer your question, Phil?
Oh, it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. I got someone here, and then Mark down there.
And there.
So could you discuss a little bit about, since you worked in large companies as well as with startups, the differences between scaling up within a large company and scaling up within a startup?
Very good one. You actually spend time on different blocks. I would say when I worked for a larger company, I had smaller role, more like for example, when I joined Oracle, I was a solution. I first run the BI consulting practice, then became a solution architect. Keith Block running the North America strategic sales team. That I was on that team. The primary focus, we have really set of goals, right? The primary focus is to go after a few verticals. I cover the financial service vertical, telecom, and travel entertainment verticals, where Oracle at the time acquired 83 companies. This sounds simple, but, you know, solution architect at Oracle was one of the most complex jobs you have on the planet because of the acquisition they have, right? So they split the business between app and tech. There are 40 plus apps we have to learn on the fly, right? And not only learn on the fly, we have to feel comfortable to walk in the room, whiteboard, and then talk to the C-suite of the largest financial service companies. You walk in, talk about what really matters to them, listen to them, right? Learn about their business in an hour or two. And then you collect that information, get back to the product team, engineering team, all the post-acquired company, and then you understand, how do I articulate the technology, the 40 plus app into this requirement. The goal is to map as many apps as you can into the solution, build a business case, and then pitch it back to those prospects, walk away from 7-figure, 8-figure deals, right? So that sounds very simple. Reality is so many moving parts you have to anticipate, because you're going to be in the room. You have this 1 hour with this CFO or CIO or CMO, the decision maker. You only have one shot, right? So it has to be highly relevant. You have to understand their business. You have to understand how you're going to solve, what problem you're trying to solve, how are you going to solve that problem, where you've done this before, right? Why it's relevant to, why they have to invest in Oracle, why now, right? And then so that's kind of working for a larger company. I find it highly valuable, as a matter of fact, because that was the foundation for everything I do today. Without that, I wouldn't be able to do what I do today. However, working for a smaller company, this AI company I worked with, I was their chief growth officer, meaning that I run everything but engineer. I had global sales, global marketing, global customer success. So it's everything you can imagine, right? The funny part is that much larger responsibility with the smaller number of team, but the scope of responsibility is much larger, meaning that you can be interviewed by Gartner, or you could be up on stage. I was up on stage talking in London, and then I spoke at Money 2020 on their behalf. And then there are many things that you have to do, and then we actually opened up an office in London. So everything from the day-to-day operation to the management, to communicate with press and PR and the Forbes magazine, all these things you have to do, you're able to learn on your feet. It's very intense, right? There's no, oh, I got to go Saturday or 5 p.m. So it was, you're on 24/7 working for startup. So I always tell the people that in my network, if you're in a life stage, you cannot afford working in that manner, get into the startup world, because startup can be very intense, right? That's not for everybody. The larger company is more stable. The startup world, you ever seen the documentary Out for Blood? Anyone? Yeah, that's interesting, right? Elizabeth Holmes, she's on trial right now. Theranos and the company, they raised 400 million and then suddenly disappear overnight, and she's on trial now. But she was, if you watch her up on stage, she's one of the most convincing founders you can ever find, right? She changed the regulation in Arizona, and just very intelligent. But the reality is, some of the startup founders who are very appealing to you, and you don't know what's behind the curtain, right? There's things that I actually run through, having worked with many startups, that I had a firsthand experience dealing with startup founders like. So and then you have to really set the right expectation for yourself, right? Knowing that the risk you're getting into, you can deal with very polarized personality, and then you have to really understand. And sometimes they make irrational decisions. They can fire people on the spot for no reason, and they can be very emotional. So you just have to have this is scaling the Mount Everest base camp, where you have to adapt constantly working for startup, but for working for larger companies, very much more stable. Won't run into that, even though sometimes you have politics, obviously, but it's not, you won't be fired on the fly, right? So, things are more predictable working for large organization. So I advise the younger generation, go work for a larger company first, early in your career, learn as much as you can, right? Because you have more of your roles specified, and then you learn in the disciplined way. Then you can go to the startup to learn and do more using that skills. So I actually spent the 12-year, actually 15-year journey to build up my skills, right? I, as accountant, financial analyst, learned how to code and learned, being a solution architect, I learned how to do this enterprise selling, and then learn about marketing, getting Adobe, learn about marketing, and then customer success. So kind of steps through every single step journey, build a solid foundation before I start getting into engage with startup. Because having that broader view, understanding of business, it really help you piece everything together. It's not about selling, it's not about marketing alone, right? It's about how, whatever business decision you make, how that affect the bottom line, and then that helps you make more effective decision, knowing the what participate with your decision, with the decision you make. So that's, I hope that answers your question.
You mentioned early on the idea of startup gaps.
Yep.
And one of the ones you mentioned was, I think I'm paraphrasing, but business process gaps.
Yes.
I think it's easy to understand how, especially a startup, would have perhaps some lax processes in how they're controlling the business and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the usual mistake that you see startups making in terms of that process, that kind of business process area? What's the usual errors that they're making?
Yeah, there are many others. For those of you who are in the startup world, oftentimes the founder has very strong product background, right? When you run into working with the product founders, the challenge for them is it's difficult for you for them to hear their data is ugly, right? So the challenge then the best product does not mean it's marketable, right? This is why, for those of you who remember BlackBerry, anyone use BlackBerry? So younger generation don't even know what they are anymore, but that was really great product. Remember those days? Much better than iPhone, right? But then the reason they did not survive, there's a reason for that, right? So the point is that the best product may not win, right? So you have to make sure, I talk about this, have to make sure it's marketable, right? It's not the minimum viable product is not the best product is the product that's marketable. So when you do that process, right, linking that project or product roadmap, you have to make sure you really link that to the market demand, and having a process. I always say creating an active customer listening path to take that feedback to your product team for much better, like how you prioritize your product roadmap, and then take that feedback to market team so that you can repeat that success. Having those processes in place are really critical, and having a process in place to interact with your customer effectively. And especially in the SaaS world, you sell something, that's a beginning journey with your customers, not the end point of the relationship. Unlike the old days mainframe, you sell something, you can just walk away, right? But then today's world, you have to re-earn customer trust every single day. What that means is that you have that process in place to listen to your customer and check in with them on a regular basis, and then to ensure not only do that, you take the feedback back to your internal team, and then making sure the feedback is really shared with your internal team to improve your process constantly. I see the hand over there for a while, but
Hi. I had a question about prepare. You said that you have to decide who your team is. So, what do you think is the best team of people? Like, what kind of qualities should they have for a business?
Great question. I always say that you have to find people with complementary skill set, right? If you have you start a company that, for example, my company, I have a few partners. I'm not on my own, right? So I learn how to code, but when it comes to the deep coding or integration capability, I have a partner. He had his own company. Two of them had their own company, and then they sold it to Gartner at $23 million. They're very deep into technology. They can build anything AI, blockchain. So they work with me. My company, we provide CXO as a service to, it's more like Uber for startups, right? If you need, you need a product to play your product or go to for development, you don't want to hire an army of people. You want to bring the team, then we have it. Or you want to bring the head of sales, head of marketing, head of customer success, that I can do that. Or, you know, so I want to find people. I also have someone really good with content, right? If you have a company to build a brand, that this person has written the speech for Larry Ellison or Pepsi, and he can jump in to help any organization, regardless of size, build the content on the fly, right? So more of a working with them, more of a complementary, and then they're also different locations. I live in Chicago. My two partners live in Silicon Valley. The other partner lives in New York. So we have the entire country covered that way. So to me is that the skill set is important, complementary skill set important, location. Thirdly is, what do you really need from your partner, right? If, you know, what else do you need? What else that is missing, right? If you're starting a business there, you know, you want to make sure the person you bring in add value or additional value that to your business. And then chemistry is very important. You have to get along. Not everybody, all the bright people get along while working with each other. My big thing is that I always hire people, work with people without any ego. The ego really kills, right? Oftentimes you can see the brightest people that if the focus is about themselves, and you cannot really achieve that won't really do any good. So really, that's the few factors. Sometimes it's also their status, meaning that if they're influencer in the field, you're building up a new business, you really need them to help elevate your brand. Then you want to leverage their network, right? But you don't have to hire them in full time. You can really leverage them as your advisor or board member. Many other ways getting them engaged to help you out.
Time for one last question.
So one of my questions here has the discussion that you had up there. I believe it was one of your first steps, that you needed to be sure that if you were like the owner or the person that created the idea, that you need to stop and pivot to come up with a strategy. How do you separate the person whose idea it was and have not take it personally, that okay, it's time to strategize things a little differently or target things in a different way? How do you provide the guidance to help them do that pivot?
That's a good question, as a matter of fact. So the way to have people really embrace your idea is to turn that into their idea, right? So the way I do it, I never walk into the startup and then tell them, force my opinion upon them. Always start by asking questions, right? So when you start in the mode of listening and learning, they usually are more relaxed, because then they start talking to you. Tell me more about this. And then, you know, they always, all the startup founders like to share their story. Tell me about your story. These 3 words, you're going to opens up all sorts of conversations, and as they share that with you, I ask them why or why not, right? And like my why and why not question usually really a lot of discussion. And then when I have recommendation, I always give them, here's option A and B and C. If you go with option A, here's the potential impact would have on your business. So at the end of the day, it's their decision. They decide which option that would go with. My role is help them understand the consequence of that decision, not to make that decision for them. So once the decision is made, is their idea, is their decision, not mine. But being an advisor for them is you guide them right through the journey, allow them to see through right the light in the tunnel. I can share the real life example on why that these are could be potential option. I'll ask them, what else do you think, right? There might be other options. And then what do you think about it? So it's always here, and then it's always their decision. Those are the two that you have to really draw a line. To me, that if you force your opinion upon them, the result won't be really, it won't get you anywhere, right? And then I think that to really, they would call you all the time if you help guide them through the journey, asking the questions. Those are the key, just asking questions, guiding them.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Helen. A round of applause for great speech and question and answers. Great.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate the opportunity. Hope to see you again someday.
Oh yeah, sure. Speaking of that, so next month, in lieu of a tech talk, Hub 88 is partnered with the IEEE group, Women in Engineering. We're a sponsor of their AI Summit hosted here on September 20th. So please, look into that. There's announcements on the hub88.org website, as well as IEEE.org website. You should be able to find it. It's an AI Summit, and it's run by Women in Engineering group. So please look into that and participate. You'll learn a lot about AI. And then also for this talk today, all of the Hub 88 Tech Talks are on our YouTube channel. So people that are on the phone now, people that missed some of the speeches or speaker can go to look up Hub 88, or I think the tag is Hub 88 Innovate is the YouTube tag. So you can review the session. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.